You're listening to episode 6, featuring the true story shared by the author, Kamnap Rittia.
Welcome back. Feels like we're heading right back to Cambodia with our author, picking up their story again in 4 years and 9 days. My life in the kingdom of hell. Going to continue exploring their life under the Khmer Rouge. Specifically, how people found hope and information when both were so scarce.
Right.
You know, we're working with a story told decades later through poetry, almost as if the author needed time to process the enormity of what they experienced before putting it into words.
It's a powerful way to tell this story.
Yeah.
Gives us both the immediacy of the experience and the author's reflection on it years later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It adds this incredible depth and honestly a unique kind of beauty to a very dark chapter in history.
Yeah.
When we left off last time, the author's family was in Phnom Penh,
Right.
a village struggling with food shortages and constantly looking over their shoulders.
It's important to remember the context here. The Khmer Rouge were incredibly successful at controlling information. They wanted to create an atmosphere of isolation and uncertainty.
Right.
Make it harder for people to resist.
So imagine being in that situation,
Yeah.
desperate for any news from the outside world,
Right.
clinging to the smallest sliver of hope.
Yeah.
The author's uncle would secretly listen to the Voice of America on a battery-operated radio, hoping to hear something, anything,
Right.
that might change their situation.
Yeah.
He was especially interested in news about Prince Sihanouk, former leader of Cambodia, or the Americans,
Right.
who had a brief conflict with the Khmer Rouge just before the takeover.
It makes you think about how we take access to information for granted.
Yeah.
Back then, a radio was a lifeline,
Totally.
offering a connection to the outside world and the possibility of a different future.
It really shows the power of even a rumor in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
And that lack of information drove the author to take a huge risk. They set out on a trip to Baek Chen with their uncle,
Okay.
pretending they were going to retrieve some pots and pans.
Right.
But their real goal was to get closer to Phnom Penh and maybe hear something about what was going on.
Baek Chen was close to the capital.
Right.
Might have had more information flowing through it. And remember, the Khmer Republic, the government, the Khmer Rouge overthrew, had been based in Phnom Penh.
Right.
It was a dangerous move, though.
Yeah.
Even something as simple as traveling could get you in trouble with the Khmer Rouge.
The author talks about taking back roads, trying to avoid Khmer Rouge patrols,
Yeah.
constantly afraid of being caught.
Right.
There was even a tense moment at a checkpoint
Oh.
where luckily they were allowed to pass.
Oh, okay.
But it was clearly the Khmer Rouge were suspicious.
Yeah.
And once they got to Baek Chen, it was like a ghost town.
Really?
The author remembers it as being so quiet and deserted
Wow.
compared to the bustling city life they knew before.
What a stark contrast, right? This once lively community now silenced by fear.
It really highlights how drastically life had changed for people in Cambodia.
Yeah.
There's this moment that always sticks with me.
Okay.
The author describes a simple meal they had in Baek Chen. Wild crabs, snails, and green vegetables.
Interesting.
They compare it to the fancy meals they used to enjoy at the Lily restaurant,
Okay.
a popular spot before the Khmer Rouge takeover.
Yeah.
And you know what? They said that simple meal tasted more delicious
Wow.
than anything they'd ever eaten.
It's a reminder that hardship can completely change your perspective when you're facing real scarcity.
Right.
The most basic things can bring incredible joy.
It's like those times when you're really hungry.
Yeah.
And even plain bread tastes amazing. Makes you realize how much we take for granted.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, even amidst this search for information and connection,
Right.
the author experiences another loss.
Oh, no.
Despite their efforts to hide it,
Yeah.
the Khmer Rouge confiscate their bicycle.
It's such a small thing.
Yeah.
But it represents the Khmer Rouge's tightening grip on every aspect of people's lives. It wasn't about them actually needing the bike.
Yeah.
It was about control.
Right.
It was a way of reminding everyone who was in charge.
It's a reminder that the rules were arbitrary and unpredictable. You never knew what might set them off.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's almost more terrifying than knowing what to expect.
Absolutely.
The author's trip to Baek Chen had another layer of complexity, too.
Okay.
They were hoping to get news of their friend Ting He.
Right.
But what they didn't know at the time was that Ting He was caught up in the violence himself.
Oh, wow. I remembered Ting He.
Oh, wow.
What happened?
Yeah.
The author later found out that Tang He had actually killed many of his own relatives in Baekchan.
Oh my gosh.
Including General Mao Sim-kem,
Okay.
a high-ranking official in the Khmer Republic's army.
Right.
After that, Tang He just vanished.
Wow.
It's a chilling reminder that the situation wasn't always clear-cut. Right.
People were forced into impossible situations.
Yeah.
And the lines between victim and perpetrator could get very blurry.
It's so unsettling to think about.
Yeah.
And it also makes me wonder what information the author might have been able to find out if they had run into Tang He and Baekchan.
It's one of those what-ifs that'll probably stay with the author forever.
Right.
But it also shows how difficult it was to get a clear picture of what was happening, even for those living through it.
So the author returns to Phnom Penh feeling defeated,
Okay.
stressed, with no news of their friend,
Right.
and their bicycle gone.
Ah.
It's clear things are getting worse,
Yeah.
and the future is looking pretty bleak.
And unfortunately, the author's story is far from unique.
Right.
We know that countless Cambodians experienced similar hardships, fear, and loss under the Khmer Rouge.
It's heartbreaking to think about the scale of it all.
Yeah.
And, it's not just the physical hardships that stand out.
Right. In the author's story,
Yeah.
it's the emotional and psychological toll that really gets to me.
That's where the power of the author's choice to tell the story in verse comes in.
Right.
It allows them to express the depth of their experience in a way that simple prose might not capture.
That's so true.
Yeah.
The poetry adds this layer of emotional intensity, makes the story even more powerful and affecting.
It's almost as if the rhythm and imagery of the poetry help to carry the weight of the trauma, the grief, the incredible resilience.
It makes you think about the different ways people process and cope with trauma.
Right.
For this author, poetry seems to have been an essential part of making sense of what happened.
And for us as readers,
Yeah.
it allows us to connect with the experience on a deeper level, to feel the emotional truth of the story along with the facts.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's one thing to know the history of the Khmer Rouge,
Right.
but it's another thing entirely to hear it told through the eyes of someone who lived through it in such a raw and personal way.
And in that sense, the author's story isn't just about Cambodia or the Khmer Rouge.
Right.
It's a reflection on the human capacity for both great suffering and incredible resilience.
It makes you wonder, where do people find that strength to keep going in the face of such unimaginable hardship?
That's a question that haunts this entire story. And it's one that the author grapples with throughout their account.
Yeah.
But one thing that becomes clear is that even in the darkest of times, there are always flickers of hope, moments of human connection that sustain people.
Like that simple meal in Baekchan.
Absolutely. It might seem like a small detail,
Right.
but it speaks volumes about the power of finding joy in unexpected places.
Speaking of finding those flickers of hope,
Yeah.
the author also shares another story that's both tragic
Okay.
and in a way reveals even more about the ruthlessness of the Khmer Rouge.
Right.
They talk about a former professor named Kek Pen.
Kek Pen was a fascinating figure. He joined the Khmer Rouge and rose to become a powerful commander.
Right.
You might think someone in that position would be safe,
Mm.
but that wasn't the case.
What happened to him?
In 1977,
Okay.
he and his entire family were eliminated
Oh, my God.
by his own comrades.
Wow.
It shows just how paranoid and ruthless the Khmer Rouge were.
Yeah.
No one was safe,
Wow.
not even those within the inner circle.
It's like they created this system where everyone was suspicious of everyone else,
Right.
even their own families and friends.
Uh-huh.
That must have been incredibly isolating and terrifying.
It was a pressure cooker of fear and suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a stark reminder
Yeah.
of what can happen when ideology is taken to extremes.
So we have Tang He, who commits terrible acts, then disappears. And Kek Pen, a high-ranking official wiped out by his own side.
Right.
It really highlights the chaos and the moral complexities of that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't always a simple case of good versus evil.
Right.
There were shades of gray.
Yeah.
And people were forced to make impossible choices.
Right.
Often with devastating consequences.
It makes you think about how the author and their family navigated those complexities.
Yeah.
How they managed to hold on to their humanity
Right.
in the midst of all that darkness.
And that's something we'll continue to explore as the author's story unfolds, because even though they faced unimaginable hardship, their will to survive never seems to break.
It's inspiring, isn't it?
It really is.
To think about the strength of the human spirit, even in the face of such adversity.
And it's a reminder that even though there will always be darkness in the world, there will also be those who fight against it, who find ways to hold on to hope and keep going.
Even when it seems like all is lost.
And that's a message that resonates even today, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
You might not be facing the same kinds of horrors as the author, but we all have our own struggles, our own battles to fight.
But then you read a story like this. A story of survival and resilience against all odds. And it gives you a sense of hope. It reminds you that humans have endured incredibly difficult times before. And that's what makes the author's story so inspiring. It's a story about the power of hope. It's a story that stays with you long after you've finished reading it.
It's hard to fathom, you know, the constant fear and uncertainty.
The author and their family endured.
It's just
stripped of their freedom, their possessions, even their basic sense of security.
And yet, amidst all that darkness, the author's story isn't just a testament to their own resilience, but a reflection of the strength we all possess. Even when we think we've reached our limits.
It makes you realize how much we take for granted.
Totally.
The simple things like knowing where your next meal is coming from. Or being able to trust those around you.
Those basic needs become even more crucial in times of crisis. And it's fascinating how the author's account highlights the ways people adapted, however fleeting they might have been.
It's like that saying, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And in the author's case, it was more than just material possessions. It was their entire way of life that was taken away.
And that loss, that sense of disorientation is something I think we can all relate to on some level. We've all experienced upheavals in our own lives, times when we've had to adapt to new realities and find ways to cope with unexpected challenges.
It's true. The author's story might seem extreme.
But then you read a story like this. A story of survival and resilience against all odds. And it gives you a sense of hope. And that's what makes the author's story so inspiring. It's a story about the power of hope. It's a story that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into 4 years and 9 days, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. What resonated most with you from the author's experience? What lessons can we take from their story and apply to our own lives? Even in the face of our own unique challenges, how can we cultivate that same spirit of resilience and hope in ourselves and our communities? It's a lot to ponder.
It is.
But I think it's worth a reflection.
I agree. And remember, even though the author's story is rooted in a specific time and place, it speaks to something universal about the human condition. It's a reminder that no matter what challenges we face, we have the strength within ourselves to overcome them.
Thanks for joining us on this incredibly moving journey. We'll be back soon with another deep dive. Another story waiting to be explored. Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those minds open.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope it left you with a deeper understanding of this complex chapter in history. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and share with your friends to stay updated on our upcoming episodes.